What is up, everyone? Sergeant Argyrd here, and today we're going to be reacting to TIK once again. Like, the legend, here, I guess. But yeah, today we're reacting to one of those popular videos, and definitely one of my favorites. And I think one of you suggested this to me in the comments below a little bit ago. See, oh, I just rapped right there. Okay. But yeah, um, this video is definitely very good. Pretty good like to dislike ratio, unlike the other one. And it's going to be exploring why Germany lost. But as you can see, there's also like timestamps here. So I may stop at one of those timestamps just because look how long this video is, guys. If I react to this whole thing, the video is going to be like literally an hour and a half long. And I've had a lot of comments complaining about my videos being too long. Like, so yeah. I'm gonna split this into 3 parts, I guess. Each 15-minute segment. So, yeah. So each video should be like 25 minutes, 20 minutes. That should be good. Without further ado, let us get started.
Hitler had not invaded the Soviet Union in June of 1941, he would likely have never got another chance.
Yeah, and I hate these people on the freaking internet. I hate most people on the internet, but I particularly hate these people on the internet who say, "Oh yeah, if Germany never invaded the Soviet Union, he would have won. He would have just invaded Britain, got all their colonies, and they would have been fine." No, you silly goose. Yeah, he's about to explain why that is wrong.
People keep saying that the Germans should have produced more panzers, they should have produced more planes, or produced more submarines. People can't understand why Hitler allows the British to withdraw from Dunkirk, or why his generals call him mad for ordering his men to stand fast and fight to the death when he has so little manpower, even though these are actually strategically sound decisions given the circumstances. Why did Germany have to invade the Soviet Union in 1941? Why was their army marching on foot instead of riding in trucks? Why are they reliant on horses? It's all related.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like the numbers on the amount of horses they use. Like I think like the like a large majority of what they were doing was with horse and on foot. It's crazy.
To the same question. Why did Germany and the Axis powers lose World War II? And it can all be summed up with just one word:
Oil.
oil.
Yeah.
Let's find out why. Few people seem to realise just how severe the oil crisis was for the Axis in World War II. World War II has been described by one academic historian as the first war for oil. When you study World War II, you should have the oil crisis in the back of your mind because that is how important it is. And we'll find out exactly why in this video. Oil is not the only factor, but oil is the most important one, and it's what dooms the Axis to defeat in World War II. That's not to say they didn't have a chance of victory, but oil is a massive problem for Germany, who's relying on Blitzkrieg or Bewegungskrieg, war of movement, to win its wars. It's also the reason that after the war, Britain is no longer a superpower, and the Soviet Union and the United States are, although that's a
Oh yeah, that's true. Like Britain, not very much oil. Those two, a lot of oil.
topic for
So
another day.
yeah.
Below you'll find a pinned comment with timestamps of parts of the video, so if you want to skip ahead you can do that, but I wouldn't recommend skipping ahead in this case because you'll miss the context. But you'll also find sources, the sources that I use down there as well. Anyway, let's just start from the beginning.
The age of oil.
The 19th century was the age of coal. Britain was the leading coal producing country in the world, thanks to Welsh miners.
Wait, I forgot. Did Germany pass them at one point? Maybe that was in steel. I don't remember for sure. But yeah, definitely Britain was like definitely the best or one of the best in coal.
It powered its ships with coal and thus dominated the waves. In fact,
Oh wait, that's dumb. Even if that did happen, that happened in like the really early 20th century.
this was the reason that it had such a big merchant fleet. It was the only nation really able to power it thanks to coal. But in the early 1900s, it became obvious that oil was the emergent dominant energy source, since oil would power ships more effectively and would be able to power planes, cars, trucks, and eventually tanks, as well as industry as a whole. Coal could not power tanks, nor could it compete with oil. Therefore, on a strategic level, whoever controlled the oil controlled the world. And at this stage, the only real oil producer was the United States of America. Venezuela and the Soviet Union, plus a few other minor countries, are producing some oil, but the United States.
Whoa, okay, that is. They're like. They're beating everyone. Look at that. That is crazy. Like the entire. What? The entire Eastern Hemisphere, like, barely compares to just one country. That is crazy. Also, I really don't like the fact that Alaska isn't shown to be part of the United States. That's kind of dumb. But wow, that is really interesting. Even today, I think the United States is the biggest oil producer in the world, if I'm not mistaken.
States was producing nearly 70% of the world's crude oil at this stage.
That is
Britain,
crazy.
Germany, France, Italy, the old European powers do not produce oil. They became dependent on the USA and Venezuela, plus others, for oil, meaning that they now have to make sure they're on good terms with them in order to not pay over the top prices for oil, but also would have to secure access to them in the event of war. If they failed to do that, they would run out of oil very quickly. This is why the Weimar Republic sets about growing synthetic oil production, since Germany has little to no domestic oil production of its own. Synthetic oil production is essentially a process whereby coal is converted into oil. And that's how desperate they were for oil. They were willing to use coal itself in great demand, and Germany was also sure of that as well. The problem was that this was an expensive process, very expensive, but it was also a limited process. However, the cost was deemed to be essential on a strategic level in order for Germany to become economically independent from the oil powers. For Hitler, autarky, economic independence, and self-sufficiency was the goal if Germany was to wage war, and oil was probably the biggest limiting factor that he faced. It took time to grow the domestic synthetic oil industry, and this was nowhere near prepared to meet the demands of Germany's oil consumption when Hitler's National Socialists took power in 1933.
Yeah, I think Germany had like a quota or something that they were trying to fulfill before they went to war, for producing oil, and they missed that target by a huge amount.
Germany was reliant on imports, and the oil producers during the 1930s were essentially the United States, Venezuela, and the Soviet Union, the nations that Hitler would wage war against or would not be able to trade with when war broke out. Even the Middle East, specifically Iran and Iraq, were not producing much oil at this stage, and what little they did produce could not be easily moved to Europe, as the British were finding out
Oh,
at
yeah.
cost. This meant that both the British and the Germans were reliant on the USA and Venezuela for oil. In Europe, Romania is the largest exporter of crude oil, but
Really? I did not know that.
even combined with German output, as well as the rest of the European output, like Hungary, this is simply not enough to meet European demand. In fact, Romanian oil production had sunk from 8.7 million tonnes in 1936 to 5.2 million tonnes in 1941.
Wait, why? Oh yeah, probably because like they got a bunch of their land taken away from them.
Partly due to political reasons. So Romania isn't really a reliable source of oil, and in 1939 Germany still imported 60% of its petroleum requirements, and that's during peacetime. So what happens when the Germans go to war?
That is not good at all.
The quick victories in 1939 and 1940 produce a massive energy crisis in Germany. When the French surrender, Britain decides to keep fighting. This means that imports from outside of Europe cease thanks to the British blockade. Germany's domestic...
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, the British blockade isn't really talked about as much, unfortunately, but that was one of the deciding factors in World War One. But like, you would think that it would also have a pretty big impact to World War Two as well. But yeah, it's not really. I don't think it's really talked about that much in World War Two, unfortunately.
Domestic oil production, synthetic or...
And especially in this time, when the German Navy was horrible. Like, back in World War One, Germany had the second best navy in the world. Now it's like one of the worst.
Otherwise, now suddenly has to meet the demands of not only Germany itself, but all the countries it's just conquered. This was really bad news. Germany and a sphere of influence consumed 9,558,000 tons more oil than it produced. And this was in 1940.
Oh my gosh.
Britain, wooed to the last moment, had declared war on him, placing him in a position of strategic and economic dependence on the state whose annihilation was the central objective, the Soviet Union. Drastic measures were introduced in May of 1941 to curb oil consumption, and these were ordered by Hitler himself. These were so severe that in 1941, Economics Minister Walter Funk said that the economy was receiving less than 18% of its peacetime oil quantities. But it isn't enough.
What?
And even more cuts
Not
to the
enough.
civilian
What?
economy followed.
What?
These cuts were so extensive that British Air Ministry observers secretly
That is
referred to
crazy.
them in early 1942 as the severest form of rationing.
How do you even drive? What the heck? That is...
Still isn't enough, and the German army is affected. In February of 1941, Goering is warned by General de Infantry Georg Thomas, head of the War Economy and Armaments Office, that fuel reserves would only last about 2 months during operational consumption, i.e. during an offensive. On the 8th of March 1941, Keitel was also warned by Georg Thomas that existing supplies of petroleum would run out in the middle of August or in the autumn. In March of 1941, General Erdhard Wagner, the Army Quartermaster General, gave an equally gloomy prognosis to Halder, informing him that once Germany lost its imports from the Soviet Union, existing stocks were only sufficient for 2 months of large-scale offensive consumption. Rommel has one eye on the petrol gauge at all times because the Italian fleet hasn't got enough oil to ship more oil across to him. In fact, the Italian fleet is sat in harbour throughout the war through lack of
Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay.
oil. In May 1941, Georg Thomas again says Germany will run out of oil in late October 1941. In late May 1941, General Adolf von Schell, the man responsible for...
How did they last so long then? Until 1945. And like, keep doing Operation Barbarossa until like December.
The motor vehicle industry seriously suggested that in light of the chronic shortage of oil, it would be advisable to carry out a partial demotorization of the Wehrmacht. At this stage, the German army has 10 motorized and 20 panzer divisions at this stage, out of 151 divisions aimed at the Soviet Union. Yet here was the leading general of the motor industry seriously suggesting that they reduce this number even further. As a result of the fuel crisis, the Wehrmacht was forced to rely extensively on horse-drawn transport, which led to further problems. The tremendous difficulties in the pace of march between the motorised and other units raised the issue of when and how to close pockets. Horse-drawn columns were vulnerable to attacks that aggravated logistic problems, and the lack of fodder and replacement animals put a strain on civilian supplies. If they do nothing, the Germans and the Axis powers in Europe will lose their ability to strike. They either have to find peace with Britain or find oil elsewhere. There is an attempt to get more oil from Romania in the March of 1941 when Goering meets with Romanian dictator Antonescu in Vienna to discuss the raising of oil production in Romania. Goering also forms the Continental Oil AG in 1940 and 41, which was essentially a Central European fuel company that aims to get as much oil as possible. It secured the Romanian oil fields for Germany by buying out Belgian and French-owned oil companies in Romania, controlling 23% of the oil production in Romania by the spring of 1942. But Romanian oil could only really go so far, and peace with Britain now seemed remote. What option was left for Germany in late 1940 and 41?
Invading the Soviets, I guess?
They could take the Middle East, but again, the oil industry there is in its infancy, and the British are not extracting much oil from it themselves. Plus, how would the Germans get that oil back to Germany to be refined? It's just not practical.
Oh yeah, that would have to like somehow conquer. Like, I don't know. That would. Yeah, that would be really difficult to get all that oil across the Mediterranean against the most powerful navy to ever exist.
So, unless he wants to watch his war machine and economy collapse, there's really only one viable option to Mr. Hitler at this stage. The occupied territories would drain Germany's meagre petroleum reserves within a year unless the Third Reich took immediate action to expand its supplies by invading the Soviet Union. On the 31st of July 1940, Hitler decides that the attack on the Soviet Union is going to happen. Some have said that Germany should have done one of several other options, like smashing the British in the Middle East or concentrating on the U-boat war. But it's clear at least in Hitler's mind that there's a time limit going on. At the Berghof on the 9th of January 1941, Hitler says that smashing the Soviet Union would represent a great relief to Germany and to Japan. After Russia's destruction, Germany would be unassailable. Russia's expanses contained immeasurable wealth. Germany must dominate them economically and politically, but not annex them. Thus, she would have all the potential for waging war, even against continents in the future. He needs Soviet oil, and his eyes are on the Caucasus. It is crucial to seize quickly and exploit the Caucasus oil fields, at least the areas around Maykop and Grozny. In oil fields that have not yet been completely destroyed, it will take about a month to resume production and another month for its transport. We will have to seize those areas no later than the end of the operation's second month. If this proved unsuccessful, we must expect the most serious.
Okay, guys, we'll probably stop around 17 minutes, since that is one of the timestamps.
Repercussions with unpredictable consequences for military operations after the 1st of September 1941 and for the survival of the economy. The 1st of September 1941. This is the date that Germany has to win by. If it
What? How did they even expect to do that? I don't understand. The first of the... That is so early. What the heck?
doesn't win by early September, the Germans will suffer big time. Why does Hitler invade the Soviet Union when he does? Because June 1941 is the latest the Germans can actually invade. Why not earlier? Rainy season, Balkans, Russian winter in 1940-41, just to name a few issues. But there is an argument to say, well, he could have invaded a few weeks earlier, and that's fine. But the point is that the summer of 1941 is the last time Germany has the option to invade because of the oil crisis. Britain's decision to keep on fighting in 1940 forces this on Germany. The blockade prevents German imports of oil, starving the Axis of the means to fight. This is what triggers Germany to invade the Soviet Union and sets a time limit to that invasion. And either way, Germany invades the Soviet Union in 1941 with the goal of keeping this to a short war. It has to be short because they only have enough oil to fight it for a few months. The oil crisis dictates that Germany must win and take the Caucasus in 2 months, otherwise their army will be rendered ineffective. They must either knock out the Soviets completely, force their collapse or surrender, or crush the Red Army and then take the oil before the Soviets have time to recover. This is why going to Moscow in 1941 is wrong. This is why taking on Leningrad is kind of irrelevant. This is why Guderian is turned south to help Army Group South, which does in fact go into the Caucasus briefly in 1941 and is forced back. It's because Germany needs to get to the oil. The reason Barbarossa is designed to be a short, sharp campaign to wipe the Soviets out at the border and then ride off into victory is because of the oil shortage. It's not because of the limited manpower. It's not because they can't replace tanks. They actually can replace tank numbers, as shown in a previous video. The Germans have more tanks in 1942 than in 1941 and more tanks in 1943 than in 1942. The problem is that they
That is interesting.
can't run the tanks they already have beyond the autumn of 1941. Barbarossa.
Wait, oh my gosh, look at that jump though. What the heck? Like it goes a little bit from 1941 to 1942. From 1942 to 1943, it like doubles. That is crazy.
Run the tanks they already have, army, then win. And there's no backup plan if this doesn't happen because it's do or die time. There's little to no mention about Soviet reserves because the Germans are hoping that they don't have any. If they do have reserves, they're not going to get the resources needed to fight them. It's interesting because
So basically, like, a lot of this is just based on chance and hope. Oh goodness.
according to Starhill, the first plans of Operation Barbarossa do not even factor in Soviet reserves at all.
Well, there was this one guy. There was this one German guy who was like, "Oh yeah, what if they had like 100 divisions of reserves? You know, just to be fair."
Paulus is the first to say, actually, the Soviets will probably have another 100 divisions behind.
Oh yeah, that's what I. Okay.
Behind the frontier troops. People say Paulus was a passive commander or bad commander, and I'll come back to that at a later date. But for Barbarossa, he was on the ball. Unfortunately, for the Germans and for Paulus, it wasn't 100 reserve divisions, it was more like 300, although
300? What? 300? That is a lot.
many were not anywhere near their full strength. But the Germans don't really have much choice. If they don't win in 2 months, their army won't be able to win because their main weapon, their panzers, won't have enough fuel to win. So it has to be a short, sharp campaign, and it has to be waged in 1941. Overy states that in 1941 Hitler made the mistake of invading the Soviet Union in the belief that the tactics of lightning war would bring about victory in 4 months. Why 4 months? They started on the 22nd of June, so July, August, September, October when they ran out of oil. It wasn't the invasion of the Soviet Union that was the problem, it was the fact that they hoped to win the war in just 4 months.
Okay, well there we go, guys. That it will be part 1 of 3 of this great video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Stay tuned for part 5. But yeah, thank you for watching and goodbye. Hello everyone, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel. And you know, turn on the notification bell thingy. And if you didn't, then make sure to leave a thumbs down. But yeah, that would be greatly appreciated. And while you're at it, go ahead and watch my other videos. They're probably just as good, and if not better than this one right now. Except for my oldest videos, don't watch those. And, you know, subscribe to these people down here, my fellow sergeants. They're other YouTubers that I either know or I have in high regards. Yeah, even my cat agrees. So, thank you for watching, and have a great day.